Everybody wants a health system that learns and improves, and some people use the term learning health systems to describe this idea. But what does it mean? And how can we make sure that patients are involved as partners in making them a reality? This is episode 1 of Pep Talks, the Patient Engagement Podcast. In this episode, patient engagement platform team member Sumaid Bella sat down with Dr. Charles Friedman, a learning health systems expert at the University of Michigan, and asked him to define the term learning health system.
A learning health system is a health system that has the capability of routinely and continuously studying and improving itself. In order to do this, learning health systems collect data about their own operation. They analyze that data, converting it in effect to knowledge. They apply that knowledge to make changes that will, with luck and with smarts, result in improvements. This creates a kind of cycle if you follow that implementation of knowledge with a study of whether things did or did not improve, why they improved or didn't, and use that experience to begin the cycle once again. Collecting data about the new state of the system, converting that to new knowledge, and making further improvements and changes. So that is basically what a learning health system is. I will add a couple of additional observations that learning health systems do what they do. These cycles of discovery and improvement. In a way that engages all stakeholders in healthcare. I like to say that these learning cycles are driven by multi-stakeholder learning communities, and it is the fact that these learning communities move through the entire cycle of discovery, implementation, and improvement as a collaborative, intact group that distinguishes learning health systems, to my way of thinking, from many other approaches to health improvement. One final observation I would make about learning health systems is that in a learning health system, many of these learning cycles, each addressing its own problem and driven by its own community, will be going on at the same time. But because all of these cycles are basically going through the same sequence of operations, they can be supported by a set of common services, which we call an infrastructure. And this use of infrastructure paves the way for these learning systems to be economical and sustainable. So that, in a nutshell, is what a learning health system is.
Excellent. Now, our audience includes researchers as well as patients. So can you give any examples of some learning health systems that would help our audience to understand what it is in real life?
Sure. I think one of the best examples, and one I frequently use, and I would encourage people to go to their website and look at what they're doing, is called Improve Care Now. This is based in Cincinnati, Cincinnati Children's Hospital, and is focused on adolescents and young adults with inflammatory bowel disease. Mm-hmm. And if you look at what they've done, much of what they've done is driven by the adolescents and young adults themselves who have these conditions, and their family members, and particularly their parents. I like to think that the fuel of the learning health system is passion, mm-hmm. and it is the passion of the patients themselves and their family members that has really driven the remarkable progress that Improve Care Now has demonstrated over almost a decade Improved Care Now started in Cincinnati but has spread across the country, and the statistics regarding their ability to increase remission rates in these diseases is quite remarkable and is a big success story. At Michigan, we've been looking at a very difficult health problem, which is out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. In Michigan, there's about an 8% survival of out-of-hospital cardiac arrest, where a survivor is someone discharged from the hospital with good neurological function. This is obviously a problem where there is great room for improvement, and we have put together a multi-stakeholder learning community that has survivors in it. Unfortunately, there are not too many of them, but also has family members of non-survivors in it, in addition to representatives from the entire, what the American Heart Association calls the chain of survival, which every link of which has to work in order for someone who suffers a cardiac arrest to survive it. As we engage our learning community and engage with our learning community, we are repeatedly impressed with the important role that the survivors and their family members and the family members of non-survivors are playing in this community.
Okay, great. That's very that makes it easy for our audience to understand the application of learning health system in real world. And you mentioned patients and family caregivers. That's a right segue into my next question, is that what role do you think patients and or their family caregivers play in learning health systems?
So, great question. They at the highest level, they are full participants in these learning communities, so they participate in making all of the decisions about what data will be collected, how the data will be analyzed. Very important, after data are analyzed and results are generated, interpreting these results and translating them into ideas for implementation, which stand a good chance of success as really informed by the experiences of patients and their family members and others closely related to them in other ways, friends, for example, who might also be participating in many cases. So this is particularly important, I think, when data have been collected and results have been generated, and this learning community comes together around the very important step of making a decision about, okay, what are we going to do with what we've learned? We want to move this into an implementation that stands a good possibility of actually precipitating improvement. You can envision a group which just consisted of one or two of this larger number of stakeholders, for example, just care providers, coming up with an idea, if they have to do it by themselves, that is completely impractical, and if shown to patients and their family members, would immediately be greeted with that kind of response. That would be polite, but they would say, gee, we don't, based on our experience, we don't think this will work. Moreover, instead of doing it this way, we think you should do it that way. So you have a generally good idea, but maybe if you did it this way, it would stand a better chance of success. So this somewhat abstract, but I think illustrative example shows why it's really critical to have patients and family members and others close to them involved in this process.
Yeah. So family and patients and family caregivers could be part of the learning community.
It's more than could be. They have to be.
They have to be. Okay. That's affirming. Now, but the initiative has to come from the healthcare providers Do you think, based on your experience, that healthcare providers or those who are creating this learning health system, do you think they are willing to engage patients and family caregivers?
Well, with all due respect, I don't think the cycle, the improvement process necessarily has to begin with the providers. I think this is fundamentally a self-organizing process that can start anywhere. Certainly care providers are interested in health improvement, and they are paid to do that. So I think in many cases these cycles will start with providers, but I think it's useful to take the position that they really could self-organize and start with any group that mobilizes itself around a problem. We have not. Come back and repeat your question here, because I challenged your premise, and in challenging your premise, I lost your question.
Yeah, no. My question was: are healthcare providers, or those who initiate learning health cycle, or those who are, say, kind of in charge of this learning health system, are they willing to engage patients and family caregivers?
Yeah. Thank you. Good question. My sense is that they are. Let me come at this from a number of directions. I think that it's almost axiomatic, including all stakeholders in learning health system activities, is so fundamental to what these activities are about. I believe that care providers who started this kind of approach to care improvement would already believe that and would not have to be convinced. A contextual effect, at least in the United States, that has really changed the zeitgeist, the spirit of the times around this, is the work of PCORI, the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, which really has pushed and successfully pushed to the point where it's almost second nature to us all. The importance of engaging patients in research, not just as subjects, but as people who guide the process and who prioritize the problems and participate in other ways as well. Now, PCORI, at least initially in its lifetime, was focused on research with very, very high levels of patient-centeredness and patient engagement. It's interesting to watch PCORI evolve to the point that PCORI is beginning to push in very significant ways this concept of learning health systems, which gives equal importance to discovery and implementation and improvement. Adding an implementation side, that loop closing side of the learning cycle, to the half of it which is focused on discovery. So it's been enormously supportive to developing this shared value now, this commonly held value, which is part of the culture. That you can't do this, excluding patients from these very important roles in guiding what happens and how things are carried out.
Thank you. That's very very clear. I have a follow-up question based on that. As you mentioned, that patients and family caregivers should be part of and are being involved into these learning health systems. But there are different levels of engagement, even being involved in a project. What are some of the engagement activities that patient or family caregivers can be involved in?
It runs a spectrum. When I went to a meeting relating to Improve Care Now a few years ago, I was impressed by some of the parents participating in the activities of Improve Care Now, who almost gave me the impression that they had dedicated their existence to this activity. And I'm not 100% sure of this, but I seem to recall one or two of them saying to me that they had retired to be able to devote much more time than they otherwise would be able to this. I'm a little hesitant to mention it because I'm not sure I'm remembering it accurately, but I think it is a fair depiction of the level of commitment I witnessed to what they're doing at this meeting. And you might want to do another webinar with Peter Margolis, who runs Improve Care Now. Certainly, not everyone can or should, frankly, make that level of commitment. In our work on out-of-hospital cardiac arrest, which, oh, by the way, is now being supported by a grant from the American Heart Association, I'm very pleased to say. We've seen a range of levels of participation, but always characterized by this passion I'm talking about. I'm working with a group at University of California, Irvine, that is forming as a learning community around the very significant problem for children who have reached adolescence with multiple excuse me, health problems and disabilities resulting from being premature. The transition of care that is required as they grow up from pediatric care to adult care, and that's a tricky handoff. So it's a very complicated system level health problem, and they are forming a learning community in Orange County, California, at the level of the county to address it. And they've held a series of organizational meetings, and you can just see the galvanizing effect of parents who have brought in as very young children, the children who in 10 or 12 or 15 years are going to be adolescents needing to go through this handoff, this transition, and to have the parents there with the children and the parents to tell their stories. It's just so compelling. So it's an effect that has multiple important consequences. It's not only the work that these people do, but the inspiration that they provide for others that is infectious, that makes this process work.
Yeah, they're excellent too. And I specifically wanted to ask you for an example, and you gave an excellent example where the patients and family caregivers are engaged even before they reach that stage, because they are the future users of the system. Again, if you have, other than this, if you have any other examples of best practices in engaging patients in learning health system. You gave this one excellent example from Orange County in California. Is there any other example that you have?
Sure. What I would alert you to, and I'm not as familiar with all of these as I should be, is a project that PCORI, the Patient Outcome Research, Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, has funded over the past couple of years, and that is a project that would expand the function of four of what PCORI initially funded as patient-powered research networks, to make them into patient-powered improvement networks. In other words, to complete the cycle. I don't have the names of the four networks available to me, but as as an extension of this podcast, you might want to add that. It's information that's easily obtained. And these are works in progress. I should say that a lot of what I'm talking to you about today are frankly works in progress. But what has been extremely encouraging is to witness a phenomenon that we at least in my experience, has not been witnessed before. A movement, a change from passivity to activity around one's own health and well-being as a first step to activation around improving the health and well-being of other people like me.
Yeah.
And this progression to this next stage where okay, I'm activated to work hard to improve my own health, but I also want to work hard to improve the health of people like me. Is really a development over the past decade. It's seen in organizations like Patients Like Me. But it's also seen in these learning communities that people, in addition to wanting to help themselves in a very active way, want to help others who are like them. It brings out the best in people.
Yeah, that's the fundamental principle that why patients and family caregivers usually want to get involved into health, learning health systems or any healthcare. What do you think? Is there any framework, or if you know, is there any way to evaluate impact of patient engagement on learning health system?
Oh, I'm sure there is. I think the question, more to the point, is whether anybody is doing it. And it's a good question. Actually, Professor Alexandra Vinson from our department in Michigan is working with this PCORI project as an ethnographer evaluator to study this process of moving from a patient-centered research network to a patient-centered improvement network. And she's using qualitative ethnographic methods to do this because this is an organizational change and a cultural change, which really can be illuminated best by those kinds of methods. We don't have results from this work yet, which is ongoing, and I'm not speaking from direct experience here, but just by intuition and from my own more general experience, it's pretty clear that that kind of transformation is challenging, and this is not a straight path with no bumps in the road. So it'll be interesting to see. How this works. So this is one example of something like what you're talking about. Research on learning health systems and how to improve learning health systems themselves is actually what my department of learning health sciences at Michigan is in the business of doing. We are working to deploy learning health systems, but we are also working to enlarge the knowledge base about what is required to make learning health systems work and how to make them work more effectively and efficiently. So we talk about infrastructure for learning health systems, and people are a key component of what we call a socio-technical infrastructure supporting learning health systems. And we really try to establish that learning health systems are not just about technology, and the infrastructure to support them is not just the technological infrastructure. This obviously all needs more research, and this, I'm hoping that it will be done by many entities that take up this charge, and I hope people who have their hands on purse strings for funding will recognize the importance of this.
Thank you. So This podcast is from the Alberta Provincial SPORE Patient Engagement Platform. So SPORE stands for Strategy of Patient-Oriented Research. One of the mandate that we have, or one of the one of the services, one type of services that we provide is we help researchers in engaging patients in their health research projects. Do you have any thoughts to share on engaging patients in health research, not learning health system, but health research that's traditionally been done?
I'm trying to think about what the experience has been, in the U.S. In this area, and I do think the experience with PCORI in the U.S. has been extremely positive. I think about one. Her name is Celeste Lee, and she is recently, sadly, deceased from chronic disease that she had for much of her life. Celeste was a model of a patient engagement herself and became a spokesperson for patient engagement. So I think that as a strategy, as I think about what Celeste did, is to go from doing it to inducing others to do it by doing more than just modeling it. I think as I look back on Celeste's career as a major proponent of patient engagement in patient centered research, I think she went through this. She went through this progression, which, in my opinion, more have to undertake to take very significant and visible and vocal leadership roles, inducing other patients themselves to be engaged. This may just be my own experience, but when I search for people like Celeste to be speakers, I really, even more so, wish Celeste were still here because I don't see enough Celeste. I think we need more people like her who are taking leadership roles as patients themselves, not as professional providers. Who might very productively advocate for this as well, but as people who are patients themselves, who deeply understand research and the processes of health improvement, but who can speak from that perspective in a way that induces the participation of others. So this is a need I perceive out of my own experience, and I guess I hope there are more Celestes around than I am personally associated with, but in my own experience, I think we need more of them. And maybe no matter how many there are, we probably need more of them than there are today.
Yeah, that's one of the things we are focusing on to create more engagement opportunities for people and maybe create such leaders. Now, I would like to ask the last question. What kind of advice would you like to give to health researchers? Because our audience, the listeners, are researchers, as I mentioned, graduate students, patients, family caregivers. What kind of advice would you give about around patient engagement in learning health system?
So the general advice I would give is to remember two things. Number one is the importance of completing the cycle. In other words, coupling implementation using the knowledge you just generated to the process of generating that knowledge in the first place. To my way of thinking, in the world that I hope we are evolving, you are not finished when you've analyzed some data, generated some new knowledge, and published it in a paper. that you should feel an obligation as a researcher to do something in the world to improve health with the knowledge you just generated. It is generally believed that one of the reasons we have the latency we have between discovery of new knowledge and its widespread use is the paucity of people who are in a position to take the new knowledge that has been generated and put it into action, put it into practice. I think we have to change our value system to get researchers who take data to knowledge to realize that they carry an obligation to do something with that knowledge, and not just to have it there in the literature and hope that someone else will carry it forward to implementation. I think if you publish it, you have an obligation to implement it in some way. This obviously won't be true in all cases, but in my own opinion, I don't think that obligation is generally recognized by most researchers.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much for taking time to speak with us. It is a pleasure for us to learn from an expert, to understand from an expert what patient engagement means in learning health system. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks so much for joining us for episode 1 of Pep Talks, the Patient Engagement Podcast, brought to you by the Alberta Strategy for Patient-Oriented Research Patient Engagement Platform. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you found it, and we hope you'll join us again for more interesting discussions about patient engagement in health research and healthcare.